Welcome, welcome, welcome to your Blue Feathered Stories. I'm your hostess, Blue Thunderbird Women, also known as Carol. Well, this week we continue on with our money stories, and it's been quite the ride. Although so many of us have lots of similar money stories, but we all have something quite unique in them. I'm super excited this week to introduce you to one of my beautiful soul sisters, Liane Cherrett, and she is here joining me. I really wish you guys could see where she is right now. She's in a beautiful place in the forest in a beautiful cedar tiny log house talking to me. I don't know, maybe her dog Cedar is around. Interesting that you called your dog Cedar while you're sitting in a cedar house. There's probably a connection in that. Anyways, I'm so honored, Liane, that you are joining us today. The listeners are going to be super excited to hear about your money stories and your journey. And I just want to say that Liane, for me, has been a mentor, a big part of my life. Let's say, I don't know, the last 10 years or so, at least around that. And it's just really an honor to have you sharing this sacred space with us and our listeners. And so I welcome you. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much.
So we are uncovering money stories in this series. And as I've mentioned before in the other beautiful conversations I've had with soul sisters, I really feel that it is time to heal our money stories as women. And you're a perfect example of someone who has definitely made some marginal moves in the money story, changing it up, creating new stories. And so I can't wait to get to sort of that part of this conversation. But I think it's also important for all people listening that they really understand that, our money stories, they start somewhere. And so for you, Liane, when you're looking back as a child and you're witnessing the adults around you, the environment around you, your friends, all of those things, what's the money story being implanted and seeded in you at that time?
Well, thank you so much for having me here. What a valuable conversation to have. I also truly believe that, it's our time as women. And back, when I would have been a child and growing up, the story that would have been painted, or the way that I would have perceived it, we'll say it that way,
Yes.
is the man was the breadwinner, and the woman had her maternal roles, taking care of the children, taking care of the home, that sort of thing. And so that's what I would see around me, right? Although I do have to say that I did have, some role models, my grandmother being one of them, that would do a lot of work outside of the home, that would volunteer, that would work with people and causes that were near and dear to her heart. And, every once in a while as a child, I got to be the tag along. And I loved that. I loved that example because it showed me what was possible. And also I think maybe to give the contrast, because life is contrast. And I've shared this, in the last couple of weeks a little bit more, is, that was one grandmother. And then I also had another grandmother that was a single mom, and I saw her working 2 to 3 jobs just to put food on the table and a roof over, her kids' heads. So I had that contrast. And then in my own immediate family, it was, the man, the dad, was the breadwinner, and, my mom was taking care of us.
Wow. Yes. Yeah. And I for me in my story, like definitely dad, like the view was that the father was the breadwinner. However, my mom worked. My mom was a teacher, and it was really interesting that through their lives as a couple, that there were periods of time where mom was the breadwinner because my dad was
Mm,
unemployed or whatever be the case, right? So it was really interesting to sort of see that dynamics jump back and forth, right? In because there was quite a few times in the relationship, in the family relationship, that dad would lose a job and then mom would be the breadwinner, and then dad would have a job, then we would be in surplus, and then dad would lose a job, and then mom was always the breadwinner. And interesting that you had a grandmother that was already finding herself sort of in that single, rearing the children and having to do the three jobs to put food on the table, at that time. I think it's something that has been going on for a long time, but we didn't used to hear about it. Now we
hmm.
hear about single moms all the time, and it's like the norm, but we didn't used to hear about it, you know, 30, 40 years ago. So as you move along and you then become a teenager, you're a little bit older, did you start working as a teenager? Did you start earning money? Like anything going on there?
Oh yeah, I started working at a young age. Well, I shouldn't. Yeah, I was 14. I think I 14? Around between 14 and 16 is when I started working. And there was a point when I was 17, 18, where I also was working three jobs. And I remember there were a few times in there that I was working a series of like 3 days, 24/7 between the three jobs. And, I was doing that because at a very young age, I wanted to be able to free up my time. I the grandmother that was doing work out in the community and whatnot loved to travel. The biggest one of my core memories as a child was her coming back from a trip, a travel somewhere in the world, and she would bring back these dolls. And I couldn't wait to see what doll or what little trinket she was bringing back from the country that she was in. And at 18 years old, I really wanted to travel, and so I was working hard to be able to free up that time because I didn't want to work while I was traveling. So that was kind of like my lead up into working 18 years old and beyond, right?
Mhm. And at that time, so you obviously had dreams of traveling, and that was one of the reasons why you were working three jobs. But did you also find that, like, what was your relationship with money? Were you already living on your own? Were you already paying bills? Like, what was your relationship? Like, what was it for you at that point in time?
I would, I mean, what comes to me like automatically without thinking about it is I didn't have the greatest relationship with money. Um, is that the truth? I'm not sure. Like I'd have to unpack that a little bit more. But I do remember feeling like money money would just come when I needed it. Like
Oh,
there wasn't a lot of like sound practicality around money. And it was just almost like this whimsical relationship with it where it was just like, well, it'll come when it comes and it'll go when it goes. And I lived like that for many years, actually.
mm. I actually
Uh,
love that. That's actually quite refreshing because it's about having faith that you will receive what you need when you need it.
True. Yeah.
I think sometimes we try hard to get back to that, to trusting,
Yeah.
you know?
Yes. And perhaps, so if I fast forward, um, that only got me so far,
Mm.
I would say. because I feel that there you want to have a I wanted to have a foundation that was rooted, and then from that foundation live more into that trust.
Yes. Okay.
So that they're like it's connected, right? There was it was almost like a disconnect, if
Mhm.
you will, at that time,
Mhm.
right? Where it's like yes, I was living that way, but then the credit card was racking up, and this and that, and
Mhm.
I was still in this place where it was like, it's okay. It was slightly veiled.
Well, actually, yeah. So thank you for sharing that, because actually that sort of bringing a little aha moment for me, because I think part of my money story is I've always tried to just trust and have faith that things will work out, that all that I need is there. I mean, we in spiritual circles, we preach that, but it's another thing to live it, right? And to really
Yeah.
live it. And so I appreciate that you can say all those things, but you're right. If it's not rooted, it doesn't really, it doesn't hold at all. It's got nothing
Yeah.
to grab onto, right? Yeah.
Well, and I think that is part of our experience as spirits living the human experience. And what I mean by that is, I then went into, opening up a business and, teaching yoga for many years. And, money never really mattered to me. I didn't make it matter.
Hmm.
I would show up and teach for free. Like I lived in that space for a really long time. And through that, there would have been a point where I thought to myself, okay, number one, this is causing a lot of stress, right? Because there's the practicalities of having maintaining and having a household and living in this world, right? And number two, I became more and more aware that if I was not foundationally sound there, and I was not overflowing, like where all my needs were like easily met, and I could very on a very practical end support another, I wasn't fully being of service to others. And so there would have been a point in time where there was a shift that happened for me, where I'm still trusting, and I'm taking the steps to become savvy and literate and empowered in like my direct relationship to finances,
Hmm.
if that makes sense. Whereas before it was just like fly by the seat of my pants. It's all going to be okay.
In that brick and mortar business at that time, was that a partnership with your ex-husband at that time?
Yes, it was. So the way that it would have started was that, he had his business and he had his clientele. I had mine. And then we basically opened up one location
Hmm.
where we housed all of that.
Okay.
Right. It made a little bit more sense, to have like a home base,
Hmm.
and then be able to do like some of the other things as well, right?
So when you were running that business, were you at all in touch with what it costs to run it? Like the
Oh
expenses
yeah.
and the and I asked that question because even though we think the answer is obvious, it's not obvious. I mean, I ran a brick and mortar business for 13 years as a bed and breakfast and a retreat center. And I left the accounting and all of that to my husband to take care of. And so
Mm,
I honestly, in those 13 years, didn't have a hot clue whether or not we were making any money at all. I had no idea.
right.
I was just
Yeah.
doing my thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So, yes. So I did have like a pulse on what it cost to run a business. It cost thousands and thousands of dollars every month.
Yes.
It caused a lot of like, excess like real estate to happen up here between the ears
Yeah.
because you're always thinking about it. As an entrepreneur, you're constantly creating and innovating to be ahead of the curve, right? We did relatively well. It's something that you always had to be on for, right? You know, we realize that like we think that like when we have a business, like we have more freedom, right? And certainly there are definitely pros and cons, but you're married to that business. You're
24/7.
24/7,
Yeah.
and I mean, I loved it. But I wanted something that the reason why I got into the work that I did is because I wanted to be able to serve people, offer them, tools for health and for healing and, transformation and impact. I knew that I wanted something that I could do anywhere. I wasn't tied to a desk. And I wanted it to be outside of an office space, right? So that's kind of what landed me into that space.
Right. And so thinking back about child observing what's going on in the money story, that dad was the bread earner and mom was the one staying at home with children. When you stepped into a relationship with your ex-husband and started having kids, did were those foundational ideas still there, or was it a different story?
Yeah, it was a different story.
Okay. Do you want
So
to share?
I feel that, this is still something that like I think about a lot. And I do feel that my experience was slowly shaping itself for me to step into a more empowered money story for myself. And I think that it's also tied to simply becoming whole as a woman and recognizing that we are complete in and of ourselves without anything else around us. And when we come from that place as human beings and we meet someone that is also within that state of wholeness, then that relationship is, you're adding to one another. You're not completing each other. And I think that that's like an interesting idea that is a collective one, where when we are seeking out a partner or a relationship, they make us happy.
Yeah.
Right? Or they complete us, or, that kind of idea. And I think that it's, unfortunately, it causes so much suffering because that has to be within us.
Yeah. I always
Right?
having myself experienced an abusive relationship and healing from that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it took a few years to come to the understanding that I gotta be damn sure that I love myself and I'm comfortable with myself, and then I can take
Yeah.
myself out on a date, and that there's nothing else that I need,
Yeah.
because I am whole,
Yeah.
right? And that's
Yeah,
a journey to get to that space. And so
absolutely.
I always do, you know, where I am today, I can reflect back and go, thank you so much, you know, for that person for playing that role in my life because it's taken
Yes,
me where I am today. Thank you so much. Like it is one of the most beautiful gifts that you've ever given me is to
absolutely.
get me to this place where I can totally take myself out on a date. I can totally love myself
Yeah.
wholly. You know, I'm not saying that I still don't have things that show up that might need my attention, but those are always fun anyways. It's like, oh, I didn't know that was still there. Okay, well look at that, right? But
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and
yeah,
so when I stepped into, my first primary relationship when I got married, it was very much half half,
okay.
which I was not used to, right? But because that's not the way that I had lived. And B, um, it challenged me in a way, but in such a beautiful way. Because, like I said, it allowed me to grow into, this part of myself that I feel needed, healing and strengthening and growing. Like that was never there, right? Prior to that relationship, it was like fly by the seat of my pants, and money will come when it comes, and it'll go when it'll go. But that didn't get me very far,
Mm.
right? And so I think ultimately, the whole piece around money was becoming more and more comfortable with it, becoming more and more comfortable with with talking about it, with using it, with making it, with like all the things, right? And I think it was, a piece of me that I was like unsure of whether or not it was something that I could do.
Mm.
Like I'm not sure that like I trusted myself
Okay, yeah.
with it, right? Um, and that's something that I've grown into, and that I've taken it upon myself to, create alternate ways to be able to, raise my family and not have finances take up more space than it needs to in my head. Because I know that, having worked with women for as long as I have, that is, one of the great stressors, right? And to this day, I'll continue to have conversations with women where they feel lesser than in this area, where they might say something like, I just want to be able to contribute
Mm.
to my household, right? And it kind of takes me back to when I was a child, right? And how I grew up. And I, like you, how you were saying, thank you so much, right? For this role, because I have so much gratitude for just the journey of contrast and opposite. Because, you know, yes, I wanted to contribute, but again, it also comes back to feeling whole unto myself. And then, you bring other people into the mix, and it's like we can support one another, right?
So I'm gonna take you back to something you said with your first relationship. You said things were half and half.
Yeah.
Quote half and half. And I'm just curious, half and half, like half in all expenses, half in like was that something that you guys did you have joint accounts where it was like everything just pooled together? Like what was the mentality? Because I always find money really interesting in relationships where I have my account, you have your account, and there may be a joint account, or you're in charge of this bill and you're in charge of this bill. Like how does that take up space in the real estate in the mind between the ears? Like what did that look like?
So it was literally half and half and separate. So it was literally like the two of us together, but we had our own, like our own accounts, nothing joint.
Mhm.
And we paid half of everything
Okay. Okay. And
down the
so,
middle.
and so I want to ask this question because a dear friend of mine, a childhood friend, in her first relationship, they did something I never heard of before, and it blew my mind. And it was that they lived together, they were married together, they had their own bank accounts, they had their own jobs, whatever.
Yeah.
But what they did is they did the half and half according to income. So meaning that if he made $100,000 a year and she made $30,000 a year, it was split in a way which was equivalent to the salary.
Yeah.
So, and I had never heard of that before, and I thought, wow, that's so beautiful because
Yeah.
if not, let's say if it's the woman who earns the lesser salary and she's having to come up with half, and he's making so much more, right? Like there's this huge stress that there's nothing left for her at the end of the day, but he's
Yeah.
got lots, right? So I was
Yeah.
just curious on whether or not that half and half story was anything like that. It was just like it didn't matter what you earned, you paid half.
Correct.
Okay.
However, I will say that, the time in which I really started to feel that, most people can probably guess,
Mhm.
is when I started to have children.
Yeah.
So I started to have children and I started to realize, I would not be making, what I was accustomed to making, because now my role has changed a little bit, and it's being called to, and my energy is being called to, take care of a newborn, right? And I remember, like, it felt like, I think about it and it actually makes me feel emotional even in this moment, that I had to speak up for myself and like ask, like to say, hey, this is the way that we've been doing things.
Yeah.
I'm not able, like, this is causing me stress because now, I have to do this, this, and this, but, what I'm contributing is not changing. Right. And I'm trying to wrap my brain around, what that's going to look like. It was when I started to have children that I started to get really real with myself in what I wanted and how I wanted to move forward. Because I don't know, when children come into the mix, like things get real. It's you're not just taking care of yourself anymore,
Yeah.
right? And I knew that responsibility would get, bigger and bigger in, various ways. And I thought, the way that I'm living is, I mean, it's okay. Like, I get by,
Mhm.
right? I don't lack anything,
Yeah.
but is it going to cut it? Right? And I had this vision that, I wanted to overflow so much that my money could actually start working for me instead of me working for my money.
Yeah. That's a huge one. Because we're really conditioned and programmed to work for the money. Like
Yes.
that's for the average person, that's the mindset. That's what we're sold. That's what everything is being taught to us. That's often what is being handed down. Like, like stories, like comments, like you got to work hard for your money. Like,
Yeah.
all of that stuff. Like it's you got to suffer for your money.
Yeah.
Or, all of those things are like popular and and they don't need to be. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I feel like to step into that space to take control and feel empowered within the idea of money at first. And actually, I shouldn't even say at first, it's been a long journey, has felt very uncomfortable
Mm.
because it feels like contrast or the opposite to how I grew up.
Yes.
Like I grew up being told, you better find a man that like makes good money,
Oh,
you
that's a
know,
good one. Yeah.
and so you know stepping into that space of empowerment felt uncomfortable because I think that it brought up the feeling of, well, you're a woman, like who do you think you are?
Mm.
Right, like this is potentially like not my realm, right? I don't know where I like where all of that like became solidified or I adopted that. But I'm now, I really advocate for women having their own money and making a lot of it so
Mm.
that their money can work for them. Not because, they can then stand, over here and say, well, I'm independent now.
Mhm.
That's not necessarily what I'm saying, but I envision, relationships and families and communities. Like, what would that look like if we all had this piece taken care of? And I think that that's basically what it came down to for me was I mean, we're human beings. We experience all sorts of stresses for all sorts of different reasons in our life. And that's not ever going to go away. It's just part of our living experience here. Um, and, money doesn't make us happy, right? Like, that's also not what I'm saying. However, the practicality of like that foundation that, everything is taken care of, right? That we have like the freedom of choice. We could pivot if we needed to. We could change jobs. We could move. Like we could do all the things, right? A friend's home burns down. Our parents get sick and we have to take, months, years off.
Mhm.
A child, like, do you know what I mean? Like the whole gamut of, life, right? We never know. But, I imagine many people, being myself included, being happy and stable and comfortable within that space,
Mhm.
the money space.
Mhm.
And I knew that it was something that I could control. I knew it was something that I could do something about,
Mhm.
right? And so I decided to take it upon myself because I knew that, I could
Mhm.
to take care of it. And then, you know, take care of the business of living.
Ah, taking care of the business of living. Isn't that's beautiful. Okay, is that your quote?
Yeah.
Taking care of the business of living. That's actually quite mind-blowing because it takes me to, yeah, I mean, isn't that interesting? Oh, I'm gonna have to ponder on that one some more because that's opening up some stuff for me. But living, it is there's a business to it. It has a cost, right? Like if you
Absolutely, it
look at
does.
it as a business, it has a cost, and so we do need to take care of the business of living. Oh
Otherwise, we're stressed out. We could live our entire life being stressed out because of this one piece,
yeah, yeah,
right? And
yeah,
I just had a moment one day in my life. I can't tell you when or where, but I
yeah.
just remember thinking to myself, this is not going to take up more space than it needs to.
Mm.
I'm not interested.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not interested.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's take care of it
Yeah.
and, do what we can
Yeah.
and then and move forward.
And so for you then, having made that decision, what was, were you still running your brick and mortar business at this time? Like when did network marketing come in for you? Because was that the tool, the answer to taking care of life's business?
Yeah, so I still had the studio, and within the studio, we had a shop that had, product and clothing and all sorts of things. And, I was responsible for buying and selling and taking care of that piece. And I love supporting local. Having had that business, I had people all day long coming to see me and show me, this and that and this product and that, like all the things, right? And, network marketing would have been one that was at the forefront, right? There's like all sorts of health businesses out there, right? That are trying to get their product out into the market. And I was like, not interested for the longest time. Like I would scoff at, the idea of that because that to me wasn't real business. And I was about supporting local. And I laugh now because there's so much ego in that. That was my ego just rearing its head. And, there would have been a moment where my kids were really little and, someone just reached out and said, I really appreciate and value what you do in the community, and people, they love you and I want to work with you. And I feel like, this could be something that, could really make a big difference. And the way that it was framed kind of stopped me in my tracks because it was addressing really the root of why I feel like I'm here, which is to provide any and all tools to human beings in order to live their best and fullest lives and be their best selves. And if that's truly my why I'm here, then I need to be open to all avenues. Mm-hmm. Right? Because otherwise I'm limiting myself and I'm limiting others. And so, for whatever reason, I was like, you know what? Let me look at how this works. Like, cause I didn't quite understand. Mm-hmm. And when I started to really understand like the mechanics of it, I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, why is not everyone doing this? I understand now why they don't.
Yeah.
But at the time I was like, this is brilliant. This is something that wouldn't necessarily have to take away from what it is that I'm already doing. It could be like this undercurrent, that is supporting the work that I'm already doing. And, ever since I've been full board.
I was just thinking about your comment, it was all ego that you wanted to support local only. And it just really sort of just like popped out in my head. It's like, well, isn't offering an opportunity
Yes.
a local thing?
Yes. And that was like the shift in perspective for me, right? My perception shifted where it was like, yes, someone like a maker or someone making, jewelry, potions, clothing, all those things, that is local.
Yeah.
And this is also supporting local human beings,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
And
Yeah.
it takes it from the like corporate,
Mhm.
right? The Walmarts, the Costco's, the Shoppers Drug Marts, right? Where it's like people do make a percentage off of that, but this is like taking it to a whole other level, right? Where it's like you're gaining the profit, if you will.
Hmm. Yeah. Beautiful. Well, let's talk about today. Where are you in your money story now?
Mm. Well, when I started in the networking industry, my goal was, it'd be so great to make an extra $5,000 a month, like to kind of supplement what I had going on already, right?
Yeah.
In my mind, that was kind of the number. I was like, that jazzes me up, you know?
Mhm.
And then, that happened. And then I was like, well, if I can do that, because it really is uncapped.
Yes.
It is really based on your effort. It's based on how many people you help. And I mean, I will help people till the day I die, right? So I don't just stop. And so, that grew. And I thought, well, why not 25K a month? And like to say that actually felt felt uncomfortable. The 5,000 felt uncomfortable, to be honest,
Mhm.
but then to go 25,000, um, it's like, we don't even know. It seems like such a ridiculous amount that we don't even know who we are with it or what we could do with it, because it's like, is that even possible?
Mm.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, actually,
Um,
I do know what you're saying because I think, again, we're very much conditioned to, well, work hard for your money. And so making, and it's just a number, but making that kind of money is like, it's just an unfathomable, it's not a reality. Like, I think that's where the mindset is. It's like it's not even in my scope of reality. So
yeah.
therefore, it must not exist.
But what's so exciting is that when you place yourself in spaces where people are truly about growth, I think there's a lot of spaces where it's like it's about growth, but like maybe not, right? Like it's like, because to me, it's like, it's being open to all of it, right? But when you start to place yourself in places like that with people like that, your sense of what's possible grows.
Mhm.
Like I would have been, at a certain time, doubtful of, making an extra $5,000, which now I think, like, I laugh, like, I think that's so silly that I would have thought that. But I did, right?
Yeah.
I think that I operated from a place where it was like, you know what? I just need to make enough to like pay for my bills, maybe have like a little bit of savings for down the road. Done. We're good,
Mhm.
right? But now I'm in this space where it's like my vision has kind of been set in motion, and I continue to help people, and this has the capacity to grow, beyond 25K to like, 150K. Beyond that, there would have been a time where I would not share numbers, right? Like, because it's like, well, I don't want to brag, right? But it's simply to, I think, be an example.
It's important to normalize it too.
Yeah. And so now we've been talking about, right? Like, my son like loves listening to Drake, and Drake has this song called God's Plan. And if you like watch the video on YouTube, basically it like prefaces it by saying like the the amount that they had to create the video, I think was just like under 1 million. And they basically made the video like the cheapest, the cheapest way possible. And they gave away all that money. Like the money that they were given to make the video was given away. And that's what they're shooting. They're shooting stories of these people that are being gifted thousands of dollars.
Beautiful.
And and so now my joke is, because my son, right, he's in a place where for them their identity is they're figuring that out, and it's wrapped around the things that they have, right? So, mom, can we get this car? Or mom, like, we'd be so cool if we had this, or right, like the brands, all that stuff. And I'm like, so I always tell my son, I'm like I'm gonna be like Drake. I'm giving it away.
I love that. Yeah.
So, but it's such a beautiful journey if one allows themselves the ability to be inspired by it, because, is like you said, like I said, like you said, is just getting back to the business of living. And I'm not tied to like having to go work a 40-hour work week. And I'm not, poo-pooing on that, because, there are lots of people out there that love the work that they do. Right. And this is simply a way to position oneself to give themselves that flexibility. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And, whether you decide to be an entrepreneur or you work in the corporate world or whatever, it doesn't matter how you serve, like you're needed, how you show up, you're needed, right? Looking at your own business of life, like what does it look like? Does it need tweaking? Do you want to change that story? I think it's so important for us to sort of reflect back on our money stories and kind of go like, where did I start and where have I gone and how did I grow and where am I today? And if I'm really going to take that one nugget is, okay, if I look at the business of living as a business, then what the heck do I need to do? Because as entrepreneurs, we're constantly looking at our businesses and going, okay, how do I need to tweak? How do I need to move? How am I going to create that promotion or that package or that whatever it is, that retreat or whatever it is to bring in extra income so that I can continue on with the business of living, right? So it's a really fascinating way to sort of put your mind in that mindset, because I think what happens is we tend to go, and I'm guilty of this, is we go into the mindset of victim mode.
Yes.
I can't do this. This is happening because of this. And there's perpetrators and, rescuers and all kinds of things and all of that whole mindset. And it's like, well, if we treat it as a business, it's neutral. It's like, what do I need to do? If you're going to just leave any kind of, I think we're going to come to a wrap up here, is like, what do you want to impart most deeply for our listeners to, if they're struggling, and they're not taking care of the business of living in a way in which maybe they need to sort of look at, well, what's the nuggets that you want to leave them today, Liane?
I'm not in the convincing business. I have free will.
Yeah.
And the choice is yours. I could embellish and like fluff up all the words that I want, but you have the choice. And, I think so many people are living in a place where their lens is of lack. And, for some, it's like, the very practical side of it, right? Where it's like, they don't have enough, at the end of their month, right? They have more month at the end of their dollar. They don't know how they're going to pay for this bill or that bill. They're having to choose between food and gas, like, things like that, right? Um, and all sorts of like other avenues of lack. But I think, what I want to say about that is, there is like opportunities are endless. It's your choice. And sometimes we're asking for something and, the universe is presenting you with an option. And then you go and say, oh, no, not that one. Yeah. And that would have been me. I wanted it to look a certain way. It's not about what it looks like. At the end of the day, it's like, how do you want to feel? Right. And, you can choose to continue to feel hopeless and, stressed and struggle and all those things for as long as you want.
Yeah.
But until you decide that, that's enough, I'm choosing another way, you can struggle for as long as you want.
Yeah.
Right. And, I share it so simply because it really is simple, but it's not always easy to choose a different way, right? Or to explore into a different option, because wherever we are, we meet ourselves. So a lot of it really has to do with recognizing, where we're at and how we see things, and whether or not that's coming from fear or love, and whether or not that's serving us and allowing us to grow, or is it simply keeping us rooted where we are, where we don't want to be. So many people say that they don't want to be where they are. It's allowing yourself to actually feel where you are, and then deciding that you're going to change, essentially. And change is not always easy, because we revert back over and over and over again, right? It's so much easier, I think, for so many people to stay where they are.
Well, it's comfortable. It's what they know.
Comfortable.
It's
Yeah,
what they know, right?
exactly. So that's what I would say, to be radically honest with yourself, and to love yourself enough to make the shifts that you need to make. And, the question really becomes, do you want what you say you want?
Yeah.
Because you can't, you're not just visualizing yourself through the process. Part of that is taking action.
Yeah, you need to take inspired action, because otherwise nothing happens. Stay where you are.
Yeah. And so that's where I would have been, like, at the beginning, right? It was like, I had this vision of, money will come in when I need it and that and whatnot, right? But was I taking that inspired action? No. So it only got me so far, right?
Yeah. Wow, beautiful. Thank you so much, Liane, for sharing Sacred Space. Is there any other spudna that's coming out before we bring it to a close?
Well, I want to say I love you. And then my hope is that you look yourself in the face and say, I love you. And then do the thing that maybe scares the shit out of you.
Yes. Yes.
Right?
Jump off that cliff. You might actually catch a rainbow when you jump off. That's the visual I had. I was like, jump off, land on a rainbow, ride it. Okay.
And it's not, it's like I said, it's not easy, but what's harder, right? Staying where you are, knowing that that's what you chose at the end of your life.
Yeah.
Or encouraging yourself through the process of what you say you want and taking that inspired action. And it might look messy. It might not take off right away. People might laugh at you, right? Like all the things.
Yeah.
But what's harder?
Yes.
I knew that I didn't want to stay where I was.
I think staying for most of us feels like dying. It's like a slow death. We just know that we have to do something different. We can't stay there anymore. So we do need to choose life in all ways.
Yes, I love that.
I mean, you could choose your death, that's for sure. But, our hope as we come from that heart space is that you're going to choose life. And choosing life is choosing yourself, period. Liane, thank you so much for sharing sacred space with me today. I know that our listeners are going to love this conversation, and they will probably have their ahas for sure. No doubt, as I always have them, as each person I have a conversation with is like, oh, that's kind of how it happens. And it's beautiful because that's the awakening, and it's all part of having this spiritual experience in our beautiful human bodies and our beautiful human vessels. So thank you so much for sharing space with me. We might have to bring you back for another conversation at another time.
I'd love to anytime. Thank you so much for the work that you do.